Hello, hello, hello. Okay, those playing at home might be able to hear me again now.
There we go. Got some audio there.
Check, 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 check. There we go.
Check, check.
All right.
All right.
Okay, I can hear myself. So everybody's caught up on their word now, right? Okay. Hello, hello, hello. Okay.
Hey,
Nick,
Professor.
let me know if you see that. I think you should be able to hear it now.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Check.
All right, so we have our header and footer working for ourselves. We're down in the footer section. The only thing you need to do there is, you'll notice the behavior of Microsoft Word. If you tab twice, it goes to the right margin. And from there, we're going to insert page number. And so I'm up in the ribbon. I'm on the insert menu item, and in that ribbon, I'm inserting the page numbers. And I've put the cursor where I want the page number so I can click current position. Okay. When I do that, it gives me a number of formats, and this is the one I'm going to request you to use. This is one I like to use a lot. If you scroll down just a skosh, just a little bit, you're going to run into page 1 of 1. Okay, so just let's use that for the format. I always like in my documents to know how many pages there are and what page I'm on, right? When I'm writing it especially. It might not even be when I read it, but that too. But did you ever track that? It's going to be in the video, and if you run into this, like you need the information, you can go back to the video. Okay, so let's scroll softly up to the middle of the second page. We're still on page 2, and it should be telling us. Now we know where we are in a document. It says page 2 of 3. Let's go to the top. Oh, okay. All right. If you go, you don't have to do this if you're watching. If you go to the title page, we have a header and footer on the title page, but we don't usually put that on there. How do we get rid of that? All right. So while we're in the header footer edit mode, okay, so there's these two modes. Right now we're editing just the header and footer, and to get out of that, you just double click into the body, and now you can go back and edit the body. And then to get back in there, you just double click the header. Okay, so that's how you flip back and forth, how you edit the two different things. Okay, so when I do that, I'm in the header footer ribbon under design. What we want to click is different first page. So just the first page, you can set up the header footer on its own. So when you click that, Word's built it in there according to the use of Word, like how many people will use Word. And usually you want the header and footer everywhere in the document one way, and maybe you don't even want one on the cover page, which we don't. So it erased everything there, right? But if we scroll down on page 2, nothing changed. In page 3, if we go down to page 3, we're going to have the same header and footer there. So far, this is beginning to shape up pretty well. Let's just finish one thing on the header and footer, okay? If you put a separator line in there, it really helps visually separate up your pages, right? So what we're going to do is while you're in header footer mode, Okay, we're going to insert shape and just pick the straight line. Okay, and your cursor changes to this big fat crosshair. All right. Okay, and what we're going to do is, you remember those crop marks? Right on the corner of the crop mark, try to get as close as you can. You can move it later. I'm going to draw a line, and I'm holding my cursor button down, my mouse button, my left mouse button I'm holding down, right? So trying to get a straight line right across the page is kind of hard. So what you do is you hold down the Control, nope, the Alt button. Nope, it's not doing that. Shift? Oh, okay. Hold down the Shift button. It's really hard to see. I can see it on my screen, but you're not going to see it. But I'm dragging the line horizontally. Whoops. Let me undo that. I have to do it again. I actually let go of the mouse. Okay, so I'm going to draw my line across, hold down the Shift key, and you can see this time I ended up like a couple pixels below where I eventually want it. And when you have the Shift down, you'll notice the lines will go at 45-degree angles. Okay, so that's what Shift gives you. All right, so you can hold a nice horizontal line. I drag it across, and I get it as lined up with those crop marks as possible. And while it's still selected, I can use the up arrow and just shimmy it up just a touch, just to get it right at that bottom of the header. Isn't that totally amazing? Aren't you totally blown away? All right. Now it's still selected, so we're going to do a Control-C and Control-V. We're going to drop another one of these in here, and we're going to drag it down to the footer. Okay, so now we're going to drag it down to the footer. All right, and wherever it went. Just going to make it go down. All right, and I'm going to place the same, so it's a nice copy of the original one, and all the crosshairs are nice. It shows you the green crosshairs that you've got it aligned. Boom, so I left it there. Okay, so now we have these separator lines. Right, why don't we save this off before we lose it? Okay, so save this with your 2-digit class ID number as a file name. All right, save it. Save it where you can get it or take it tonight. I'm going to put it, I just stick things on my desktop so I can get at them later. So, you know, it'd be like something like, I would name it my 2-digit class ID number, my name, and then I would put maybe I'll just put KS report draft, okay, while you're working on it. I'm saving this off, so you could name it something like that. I'm going to have you upload this into eClass later. So save that off. So we're safe. Okay, now we had not saved it yet. Okay, now we're safe. All right. Now, one thing about having all this extra information with anchors and all that kind of thing on this page is sometimes you go, I just need a clean look at this. Well, the cheat or the hack is go under File, Print, excuse me, and it will show you basically what your document looks like. And you can zoom in on that and zoom out. All right, so you can get a better look, and let's go to page 1. Let's see how page 1 looks. You need them? You can make it anything for right now. Yeah, it's on eClass. When we do it later, you just rename your file quickly. Okay, and so here it's more of a WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. This will look, oh, okay, boy, I'm going to really pull back the border on this name block down here, right? So I'm not actually going to go print it. I'm just going to escape and get out of there, all right? But I was able to see it in a clean version all at once, like the whole page on there. Is that a pretty useful thing? These are all things I use while I'm making these big, long reports, and you start losing track of where you may be, all right? So boom, okay? All right, so far so good. Okay. You have table of contents. What's the first section that we're going to put in here? I'm going to make this left justified over here. What's the first section would go in a big report like this? Anybody do any reports like this? Executive summary. Okay. Now, I have 2 videos on executive summaries. By now you've got experience. How do you do an executive summary? I have these 2 supporting and conflicting videos. They talk a little bit differently. You have to get the general feel of what an executive summary is if you've never used one before, or never created one on your own. You've probably read them. And by the way, I mean, if you need other input, just Google things like this. You'll find your own YouTubes that might show you something interesting. But I give you 2 YouTube videos. One of them, I mean, I think they're about 5 minutes each or 7 minutes each. And one of them talks more about a grant application, which might be a little bit more formal, and names a couple of things in there. The number one thing that you'll hear one of them say is you always do the executive summary last. In theory, you really do. You know, anybody teaching the subject should really be saying you do your executive summary last. Well, your executive summary gets finished last, but it should be developed. This is how I see it, is you're developing the overall 1-page power series of comments for executive management. They sent you out there. What was the goal you were after? What's the one thing they're looking for from this 30 to 35 week stint that they sent you on? Think about Mod 4. What did you need to do to get out of jail? How much? 25,000. Yep. Okay. So that's what you are going to focus on, right? This is the point to be driven home about these kinds of things: is clear the dust and go, what were we supposed to do? We did it. Okay. So don't lose sight of that. And then name the biggest things that you only have 1 page to talk about how you got there. Interesting things that showed how much you accomplished and how you can now take this generalized information to the next 12 sites. Remember, I was talking about the premise in weeks past, that the idea here is that you're going to really mop up the mess that's at this site with these tools, these sales tools, your checklists, and you're going to be promoted and, more responsibility, risk, reward, and penalties, if you will. If you don't hit, you're now going to manage 12 other managers. Now you have this package. Basically, this report is a core of the package with that other student document that you had, the student, what do they call it, instructions or whatever, right? Student guidebook, handbook, student handbook. That's pretty much everything everybody has, all right? Now, I've mentioned that there was a major omission in the student handbook that you want to bring up in such ways as the current documentation of the process was incomplete. While we were doing this, we discovered that, and this is very, very important because it hits the bottom line, okay? So you have to decide what you're going to write about in the top executive summary, okay? In real experience, how does this work? How long are you going out to do this? Approximately 30 weeks, over half a year, right? There's a big urgency, but there's other urgencies in the company, and the executive management had gotten together and said, we're going to send that new employee out to do that, see how well they do, right? And they send you out there, but all these other things are going on in the company at the same time. They kind of forget about you. Unless you're calling back every night and managing communications really well, and sometimes as the report, you're the one reporting up, sometimes it's hard to grasp the attention of those that sent you out there that you're going to be reporting to. So a lot of times you have to think about your executive summary is clarify that you were sent and that was the goal and you reached it, all right? Quite often goals get changed over time, all right? So I'm trying to give you the soft side, the really, really important soft side of what goes on in these reports. That's why I put so much emphasis on this, because you could learn a whole bunch of neat parlor tricks with math in this course, right? But it's really about how you build the story, As industry goes on, as life goes on, society goes on. Right now, it's about telling a story, and the story of the success, and I just happened to be the root of why it all happened, You have to draw attention without being too much, not grandstanding about it, right? So that's one of the real purpose of doing this is to be able to think about that in terms of when I read these things, when you deliver them to me, I'm going to be approaching it from that standpoint: is how much did you appease an executive's thought process about this troublesome site that we have, and there's multiple of them. In this country we have at least 13, and it might be distributed around the globe. Operations these days is you're either up or out. It's kind of like they talk about the sharks. If the shark stops swimming, they die. Right now, you can't avoid in business being part of the life cycle of your industry, where the opportunities start getting commoditized, and there's consolidation in the industry, and then there's fewer and fewer, bigger. Like, where's that happened? What do we use every day that this turns out to be? Think about the internet, things you don't have like a really big choice in using out there. What search engine do you use on the internet? Does anybody use anything but Google? Right? How about, can you name another browser? What is an alternative? What other browser could you go to? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. How about, let's see. Social media, of course. I don't know what anybody's using, because that does change nowadays. There's a lot more options in there. Yeah. Anybody in here heavily onto it, like Instagram or whatever? How about Facebook? Anybody using Facebook? Just out of curiosity, business-wise, would you rather have a business have a website or a Facebook page? You would be looking for the website.
Or it depends on the business.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah.
If you have a site that's going to have its own form.
So there's a community involved. Exactly. You're saying. So then they could. Yeah.
The site itself, I would prefer that to Facebook, because then you can control who gets.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. It's really interesting, because there's no one answer. In fact, that's how I ever got connected into the college here. I was working with a couple of people that were working with internet, with your online reputation, and we were coming in, and I brought some experts in, and we were discussing with students, MBAs, and everybody else doing presentations here about that. That's how I got connected here. Was your reputation, how you manage it out there. There used to be more of a framework around that. I think people are just naturally now being guarded about what they do out there. Of course, undergraduates, when I talk to them about jobs, I said, look, as they come in as juniors, I say, look, if any of you have a single picture out there with a red Solo cup in your hand, get rid of it. I said, that's usually the alarm that goes off. The bane of an image is you with a Solo cup in any way, in any form whatsoever, That's a good clue. All right. So let's get back to this. All right. But so we have an executive summary. You want to really do this as your power statement and bring everything into it. All the discoveries you did. Okay. The things that you failed by made. Every time you said, oh, now I know how to do that the next time I get in there. Again, you all got through this pretty quickly. So some people in other times have much more struggle getting through. All right. Okay. So your executive summary, I gave you an idea about how that works, right? Okay. Now, the table of contents wants to see structure with what do you call them? Headings in here. How many people ever structure their Microsoft Word with actual headings, like organize it? Okay. So this is what we're going to want to do. Generally in here, you're only going to have one type of heading. Okay. Does anybody use these heading styles up here? Anybody ever use these? This is a good time to learn it. Okay. So what we could do is we're going to take the executive summary. Okay. The way the table of contents works, you're going to have to do this. All right. So if you haven't been doing this before, you want to do maybe go offline after we do this and create your own Microsoft Word document. Put like 3 or 4 headings in there, and make sure you can create the table of contents. Like get the process down before you need it, kind of thing. It might take you 20 minutes or half an hour, and I can help to find like a YouTube that will show you how to do that. Okay. So like what happens here is we take executive summary. Right. By the way, okay, we didn't talk about this in here yet, but everything should be times. I'm going to grab all my text, right, and I'm going to come up here and change that to, I don't have it in paragraph, right? Okay, and what I'm going to change everything to is to 12 point times Roman. Okay, so everybody's going to use the same font, same size. Where is it? ST. Not finding it in here. Right there, okay? So Times Roman, everything just should have gotten kicked over to Times Roman in here at all the different font sizes. Okay, yeah, that looks different now. So that's Times New Roman, right? Okay, follow me on this. This is going to get a little bit interesting, right? So we want that to be heading 1. You go heading 1, 2, 3, 4. They desk underneath each other. All right. Okay, so we're going to select that, and when you click the style and you click and make it a heading 1, when you look up in the heading styles, you're going to see that it's some kind of funny font. And if we look up here, it says a Calibri Light at 16 font. We don't want that. We just want our headings to be 12-point font, right? Okay. So right-click up in the styles area, click on that heading, okay, the heading 1, okay, and we're going to click modify. We're going to change this back to what we want, all right? So you might put in here just to keep it away. These are default heading styles. You might want to just put in there. You want to keep the name short because you can't see much of the name when it's up there, right? And I'm going to name this MGT for the school type of thing. MGT heading 1, all right? I want a short name so I can read it up there, okay? Style based on. You can leave these sections free. Now we're going to change this formatting back to Times New Roman and drop it down to 12, okay? And we're going to make it, you can use automatic, not blue. If you remember, it was big, it was Calibri, and it was blue. Now we're just changing it back to black, 12 Times New Roman, okay? All right, so far so good. Very inconspicuously down here is a powerful button. Click Format, and we took care of the font side of things. Let's take a look at the paragraph side of things. And it's trying to throw us curves by doing things like throwing the spacing back in there. Let's make that 0. Let's make it double line spacing, and don't add space between paragraphs. Those are usually the things that get you. We're all done there. We're just making it back to what we wanted it, all right? Now that we have these 2 different setup pages set, just hit OK, boom. Now it looks the same as when we started, but it has the little hierarchy dot in there. That little square dot thing tells you it's part of a structure of headings, okay? Okay, so what's another, okay, so what comes after executive summary? Technically, you should have an introduction. Usually you'll have an introduction that doesn't repeat that, but it sets the table for the rest of the report also. Okay, so introduction. I hit enter. I'm going to select introduction, and I'm going to hit it with the management heading 1. Bang. See, it just changed it completely. Now you've sped up the process. Every time you have a heading, all you have to do is come up here and click. While it's selected, you select this, and it'll change it over to one of these headings. Now, that of course is going to end up on the next page. So after executive summary, I'm going to do a Control Enter, push that down to the next page. Okay, there's our introduction. All right, you might. The executive summary is going to be power statements about everything you've done. The introduction might be a little bit of a reminder of how this whole thing's set up. A little bit more of the story that, arriving on the scene after being assigned for this with a goal, keep repeating the goal. The goal was to hit 25,000 within 30 weeks. Okay. I showed up, the situation was like this. And then the process, don't do a play-by-play, but you want to explain the development, the evolution of what you did, and say, we ended up having to work. We decided there was a missing tool set. We didn't have end of week checklists, we didn't have start a week checklists, and we didn't have any way of analyzing profitability and schedule through the Excel. Right? So that's the introduction. Okay. That doesn't have to be too long. You know, approximately a page or less, maybe. Yeah. Now, the next section that we would do would be what? What are the two? Let's think about this. How would you organize this? Let me ask you. From the outset, is there some kind of orthogonal structure of what we're looking at here to break it up logically? How would you logically break up what you need to talk about? Anybody got any ideas? See if the Knicks have any idea. We're watching over here. I'm seeing if you're there. Anybody? Now, how would you break this report up? Is there certain lines along which you could divide this and conquer it? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Keep working that. What you look for, don't you always look for kind of a framework, of an overlaying framework that you can talk about that's logical, that even the executive summary or executive management people would understand? I mean, it is their factory. They might not know the details very much, but you need to explain what you need to do to shape this up so they'll understand it and you can explain it fastest. Okay. What way is it already organized? Go with what's natural first, see if that works, right? So how is your work, when you go into Mod 4, what is the organization when you go in there? What can you borrow from that? Is there a way that you can look at what Mod 4 experience was like to be able to break that up? Try to think, well, I'm thinking about having you originate a good way to frame this up. How would I start talking about this? With what? What structure lends it best to convey what's went on? There's two things I'm thinking about. Okay, when you go into when you helicopter into Mod 4, when you enter Mod 4, they helicopter you in there. What are you looking at? Literally, what's on your screen when you get into Mod 4? Along the lines of that, come back out. Like, what's the big picture? What could you be looking at? Excuse me? Yeah, you're getting to what I would suggest. I always do suggest. Yeah, and what if you look at the entire floor? Is that divided up somehow? Yeah, there's functional areas, right? So pretty much what you're going to do is say, what did you do for every one of those sections? How did they affect outcomes? What did you cure? What were the issues around every one of those sections? All right? Okay. Now the second part of it, the other part of the overlay, what are the two main things about... Okay, I'm hearing from at least Nick M. Okay. What are the two things in the Excel file? We worked on the first half of it. What was that all about? All that work on the Excel file. What was the heading that we put under there? What were we calculating there? A lot of work. 12 contracts at least to get in there. A lot of columns. What were we after? Why did we need that? We were given the contract value, and then what did we want to figure out? Put it into business terms. What did we label that whole section as? What's the core goal of a company, any company? You're dabbling around the right words there. Yeah. Profitability, right? Okay. So that's what I want you to draw is formalize that in your mind that now you can take a company and most of it is about profitability. What we're going to cover in Excel tonight relatively briefly, and I've already mentioned it, but I just want to make sure that you can borrow all the knowledge we've already used. And I was mentioning that all that work that we did on the profitability side was about 3 times as much work as it takes to figure out some way of forecasting how long it would take for a contract, right? Because you're given a contract value, the number of items involved, and you're given a time to get it done in, right? So you're not going to take it unless it makes money. And then again, you're not going to take it unless it makes most money for all the contracts that are available to you to bid on. And what did we figure out? Pretty much, you're never going to get a contract that is above your reputation. Okay? All right, so the whole left side of it is about profitability. And we looked at, 8 or 9 different costs involved with that. And how were they distributed? Those 8 or 9 costs, how were they distributed around how many functional areas do we have? For those playing at home, this many? 5, right? Okay. So I want you to take that and apply it to thinking about any business you're going to walk into. How do I even attack this thing? Well, what we did is we broke it down to the areas. We looked at the costs in all those areas, right? So go with it. We went that way. All our work was focused on this structure about how to look at this. So in our report, we're in profitability. We want to talk about what impact each of those 5 areas has on profitability. All right. So does it look easy now that we kind of see it? That makes sense. Quite often, those kinds of issues are sitting in front of us. If anything about the MBA is count things. Count how many areas. You have 5 areas there. You might have 3 levels of employees. It's to categorize. All right. Things get easy as soon as you start categorizing them, even if you know that you're incomplete, as long as you're accurate. Okay. So there's a difference. You might be missing a couple things, like we said about costs. And what do? We applied that thought process in costs. We go, we're going to be really close if we track these 3 big costs. And what was the one big one that we left off the table that we didn't really track, that we want to keep in our report, right? When you get to the HR area up there, as you're writing your report, you're going to want to bring in that information. You're going to say, significant to HR is it takes a little bit more. It's going to take some systems and IT integration, analysis of the problem, the problem a bit. But your next steps, i.e. what you put into your conclusions, in your next steps, you're going to say, to really tighten this up, we've got to get a handle on labor, and manage that. We did the best we could with these other 3 major costs, and we did the best with our, really gut feel about how to hire, where to put people, and move them around, and train them or not train them, right? Was training a viable strategy? Was it an unviable strategy? It was a very unviable strategy, yeah. Now, somewhere within this, as I said, if there were like a 2nd level course, I haven't even looked into the simulation enough to see where that, you could do an entire course on just the labor part of it. Keep all other things constant and say, what can we move around here? What are the things that we would change around about labor, in here? All right? Okay. So everybody should be pretty now organized to think that we have 5 areas. Each of them impact profitability. And each of them may or may not, let's continue the model here, how do they affect the schedule? In other words, the schedule at the level of, we're given a contract to bid on, right? And we're going to figure out how much time we think it's going to take us to get it done. Unless we do some extreme things, we use what? A baseline. We're using a standardized model And what were the standardized parts of the timing of a contract? Up front, we just wrote in a couple of weeks for what? What's the first part of the things that take up time? Getting material, right? So we just used a standard number of 2 weeks. 3 weeks would probably be also good there, all right? If you want to be conservative, which is a really other good concept to think about here. As you're doing forecasts and estimating, conservative means you're not bluffing, but you're hedging, okay? So the word hedge means mitigating risk. You're going to mitigate risk a little bit by extending your estimate, right? What's the drawback about extending that estimate of time? Just in this example. One of your competitors is going to come in shorter time. All other things being equal, they're going to come in and offer it at a shorter time. All right? And we can talk about that in terms of when we talk about the network of tasks. Okay, I'm going to write over this. It doesn't have anything to do with this. When we're looking at critical path modeling, I'm going to be talking about statistical application to a schedule here. Okay, and we're going to talk about this when we introduce the level of a stochastic or probabilistic outcome. All right. That with so many variables in a big system, on average it comes out so far, and if we took 32 instances of running a project through this same network, it's going to have a standard deviation. And everybody should not get nobody should get freaked out about standard deviation when you understand what the definition is. And I'm going to go over that tonight, okay? But I'm connecting things together here is, even when we're doing scheduling in here, are we sure every time we took that same contract it's going to come out the same time? No. I mean, it depends on what other contracts are in the hopper at the time, how much labor, how much time it takes to sort all the incoming material and all that. It's different for every time you get this. If you only did the same contracts all the time, it all depends on what stage the other ones were at and everything else. So you need a probabilistic approach to that, okay? So I bring that up. It doesn't have to be in your report. It has to do with bridging to some of the text type knowledge that we're going to be looking at, okay? And it has to do with this type of thing, okay? But getting back to this, we're relatively simplistic. There's a first step to understand scheduling comes through the simulation here. Okay, we went through and we said, okay, we can talk about each of the 5 areas and what impact each of them had on the profitability, and we can look at each of them as how they impact schedule, all the things in there that affect schedule. If you send somebody out there, isn't that what you would want back? You want to see that they have real control out of all these things. Okay, so what we really have is a 2x5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'll draw it over here. We have a 2x5 kind of matrix like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so this is profitability, and this is schedule, and this is going to be, say, in a sense, you also want to organize it. Perhaps you want to relate this in your paper. Is I'm going to organize this with a flow of materials, for instance. So the first section that you're going to talk about might be receiving, right? And then there's a production, and then there's shipping. Right. And then you have the contract area, contracts it's marketing and contracts, and then you have HR. All right. So you really have 5 sections, and each of them you're going to talk about the profitability of it and the schedule of it. Okay. What's a good way to lay out your paper? Would you take each area and talk first about profitability, then schedule, profitability schedule through your paper? No. Good, you picked up on that. No, you're going to probably want to have 2 massive sections. One of them, profitability, each of the 5 sections, and maybe even a sub-conclusion area in there about the profitability overall, and then a schedule 5 areas, okay? I think that reads the best, I'm always open. If you come up with something that makes more sense, the whole thing about business is everyone has a chance to do better. Every day you do something, you can improve it. So, but this is pretty straightforward. This will get you through. Okay, so that's what I want to make a point about this. This will get you through your paper. Okay. Okay, and so I bring this up because we're talking about what structure you might have here. My glasses. Okay, so perhaps we would be doing profitability analysis or discussion. And then it would be a massive section on, or major section on schedule analysis, right? So these would both be at heading 1 levels, all right? And under profitability, I'm going to do the shorthand version of this. We would see RX is usually a shortening of receiving, okay? So we'd have a section on receiving, production, shipping. I'm using extreme shorthand here just so it reflects what I was talking about as far as an organization goes, shipping. And it would be marketing / bidding and HR, okay? So we'd have 5 sections there, all right? Okay, without getting too crazy with this, we're going to create a second level heading, okay? So these 5, let's select it to be heading 2. Now see how it, if you look, you'll see, if you do it, it's going to change it to the format that the style is set up with. But we do get the square button next to it that tells us that it's a live part of, what do they call it in Word? You can actually view these, view outline mode. See the outline mode over here? I'm not going to click it yet, but this allows you to completely condense your document just to the headings, right? These are part of the outline. Okay, I'm not going to click that yet. But what we want to do is we're going to go in and we're going to format heading 2, all right? Very, very similarly how we did it to how we went through the process of heading 1. So if I right-click that and I modify it, I'm going to name this MGT heading HDG 2, like that. Okay, we'll go through. We're going to change one thing. This will be fine. Okay, so we're going to change one thing differently than we changed in Mod 1. Okay, so we're going to make this times Roman 12. That's all we can do there. That all looks good. We're going to go to Format, Paragraph. Get rid of this left justified. Special. We're going to make it double. Don't add space. All right, everybody good with that so far? Okay. That's all we need to do in there. We did the same thing here as we did in heading 1 level, right? The only thing I want to change is we're going to underline it. That's the only difference between this heading and 1. Well, these will be underlined. So you're going to see, like a heading for 1 and then these underlined headings underneath it. And that's going to be level 2 for you. All right. We're keeping it really simple here. All right. So notice it did it for us. It changed the font, the size, underlined it, and everything else. Okay, so I don't normally do this, but if I go View Outline, if I click that, see how it just condenses it down into your outline mode? And this can be very helpful in the future, right? In other reports that you might do, okay? So, go back to View. Oh, when you're in View, in Outline, if you look at where I'm showing it, where did it go? It went away. Never mind. I can't find it now. It was just there. Okay, so we're going to do it in, I think print layout is where we came from. Oh, I don't want that. Yeah, it's in. I think we look at it in print mode. Now, what we can do is we wanted these same subheadings, these same 5 subheadings. Control C. We want the same ones. Control V, right after schedule. All right. Okay. And then the final section will be conclusion. Conclusion. I'm not going to make them subsections in here, but 2 major things you want to put in the conclusion, you'll see almost all the time that's standard, is lessons learned and the next steps. Okay? So some of this, a good report will be redundant in the right places. All right? So it can be, think about it being fairly standalone. Somebody reading this, reads the executive summary, the introduction, and the conclusion, they'll get a lot from your paper. They can kind of stand by themselves, right? And then most of the details in the body, okay? So notice that when we type in conclusion, it goes back to some other font. It went back to Calibri, right? So don't worry about that yet, okay? Then we're going to put in appendices. So we're going to have some appendices, right? Okay, so the first one will be profitability analysis, complete. Schedule analysis, right? We'll just keep repeating everything we know already. I'm just helping to frame this up. And then we're going to have end of week checklist and start of week checklist. Right? In the real world, you'd probably have like a start of the week and then end of the week. But here, you enter into the middle of a week, so it's the end of the week is more important. You don't do a checklist on the way in; you do a checklist on the way out. That's why it's in that order, right? There you go. So let's make these 2 items heading 1, and then these other sub appendices, we're going to make them heading 2. Okay, so make sure you save this to somewhere where you can get it. Okay. Let me think. I've got quite a few things named here. What do you think about this so far? What I present here is use this as a launch point for other reports you might do, like where you work or when you're asked to do something. They might say, oh, by the way, here's a template or here's a file that somebody else produced. Keep working on it. And maybe they don't care that you improve it or simplify it. Maybe there's some crazy format that's very difficult to manage. This one's very manageable, okay? All right. So how many people here are PC people? How many people are Mac? How many people use Macs like all the time? 2, 3, really? How many PCs? Not so much, really. Okay, it's interesting. I'm not sure what the command is. There's a command something in the Mac. I'm a PC guy. And so on the PC, I'll have you use the equivalent here, okay? So find your Excel file that we were working on that had the profitability in there. Oh, I have it on my thumb drive. I have to put it in. So I didn't find it. Okay. So under Kibby and Strand, let me close this. I don't want them anymore. But, okay. So if you remember, this is where we were. I want to shrink this down a little bit. Just do 100%. Okay. All right. So you're gonna end up going with 12 contracts. You've got to get enough in there to show some diversity of the contracts, so that especially these columns that we did subtotals and we looked at the percentage contribution of each of the 3 costs into the total cost and all that. You're going to want to be able to look at all of these and have that calculated and go, now I know why XYZ fabric or ABC garment paid well, or why I didn't do well. Oh, I thought that was a lot better. No wonder why it took me 8 times to get through bot 4. Okay, that's your idea here. Think about it in the real world. You don't want to waste your time in this factory. You have 30 weeks to hit this. You know how close it was timed, but most people hit it on the 29th or 30th week. You know, you're really close. All right. So you don't want to be bidding on less than optimal garments. That's the motivation here, you know, more than the academic part of it. Okay. Is in a real business, you're going to try to figure out which one of these are most profitable, and you're going to look at this. The market research is going to tell you whether it's coming in vogue, you know, into the season or out of the season, or it doesn't matter. Some of them don't matter, right? So you're going to want to focus on these gold or yellow columns, all right, that tell us the hard dollars and the percentage contribution all the way out to the net numbers that we did out there, okay? Uh-oh. I gotta check in with. Hang on a second. I got a comment here. What is liar? Okay. I'm not sure if he's calling me a liar or he has an acronym for something. Okay. All right. Okay, so everybody got that? This is the core of explaining why certain contracts work. We're going to do it a little bit ex post. In real life, that's going to happen. You walk into this buzzing environment, you had 5 contracts you got to handle. You're going to just get them through and gradually be able to build this Excel file so every day you gain 5%, 10% more control over what to bid for. So it's not unlike a real crash program in real life, all right? So because this is so important, my whole point with this is that we're going to want to reproduce this in our document. And we're going to use screenshots to do that. On a PC, if you come down here to the little, what do they call it, the Windows button or whatever they call it, and you type in, what do they call it on here? My mind went blank. Wait a minute. It's snipping tool. Yeah, I actually have it set up as in my tray. Okay, so type in snipping tool and it will come, or you have to tell it to bring it up. So you get the snipping tool here. There's, as I say, equivalent in is it? Yeah. It's pretty similar. Pretty limited to what you can do with this. I'm going to show you what I actually use, all right? I'm pretty cheap, and I actually spent money on this. I rarely buy actually software and keep it updated and all that. So it costs me about $50 or $60 every year or two. They have a major upgrade, and so I have to get it. But the snipping tool, all you do is you click New. So you're going to do a new snip, all right? And in your document, you're going to grab the section that you're interested in. Now, think about this reproduced into your document, even though we had one page for all of profitability in the appendix to show the profitability. Now, you got to imagine this is all filled out. It's got all these numbers in here, the names of the garments and all that. Okay, so I can stretch a box around what I want. Okay. So let's say I've got to think about reproducing this in the document. So I might have to just take one section at a time like this, right? So the first section would be the material costs, right? So I've got a screenshot here. I can do a Control-C. Now what am I going to do with that with Word? Okay. Okay, just checking some comments whether they can hear me or not. I think there's a little trash talk going on over here in GoToMeeting. Okay. All right. So now I have that on my saved on my clipboard, right? So I'm in the document. It's pretty rudimentary. It looks so cryptic right now. It looks ugly. You know, it actually looks ugly right now, right? So when I do a screenshot of that, I'm going to come into the profitability analysis down here. Okay. Let's set the page up a little better. I'm going to do a Control-Enter. I want to work on my own page with profitability analysis. So I'm going to clear out by creating its own page here. All right. So I put it on its own page right after this. I do a Control-Enter, and now I have one page. This is how you start growing a document, section by section. Right. So we're going to flesh this out a little bit in profitability analysis. Okay. Now, in profitability analysis, this is the appendix. Okay. As I say, if you shrink your screen down and take a screenshot of all the entire profitability analysis, it's not legible, really, if you think about it. So you're going to have to break it up a little bit in the appendix to create. You want to reproduce all that source information in a way that you can refer to it. Think about it this way: that now you've sent the report back digitally. Think about how this works in real life. You sent the report, you're returning after a success, you send the report back digitally, and somebody in the office prints up 13 copies of this thing, and they have a schedule for a debrief. Okay, so you're coming back after more than a half a year away, and you've succeeded, and you're a rock star, and you're going to come back and report to all these executive summary or executive management people. And the way that it works is they've all kind of printed this out, and what do? The first thing they do is they pull back that title page, and they go for the executive summary, and the first thing they want to see is what did we say? I had the best time fulfilling and attaining the goal of $25,000 in 30 weeks. You're going to say that one way or another, cleverly, smoothly, right up front, right? So you're settling everybody down, bang, 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 and then they go, oh, that's great. Who was that again? This happens. Who did we send out there? Who was that person? They throw it aside. They go back to their work, and then 2 weeks later, you finally get back again after you clean up work and everything else, and you're going to give the meeting. All they know is they marked off that you were successful. The rest of it is detail. So then you have this debrief meeting, and you have this report, and you're going to work through it. So you start presenting. You have your PowerPoint version of it and pages and everything, and someone goes, well, the accountants are there, and they go, yeah, but how did that work? And you go, okay, this is the whole point here. Refer to the appendix, and then you can find it clearly, and you can have the way that we're going to put it in here. You're going to have rows and columns, and you're going to say, cell, R16. If you take a look at that, and then you're able to explain it. That's why you have these appendices. This is not a dead issue or a dead assignment. This is a core of how you're going to do a report with the anticipation that it was that important. You're going to be able to give a report about it. In fact, you might do a video about it, so you'd even want to be able to have the report that way. All right. Or it ends up being a teleconference or something, okay? All right, so I still have this thing sitting around on my clipboard. I can do this. I can do a Control V, and I can just put it in here. We're not going to do that, okay? We're first going to insert a text box, and I don't have any text selected here. And I'm going to draw the area where I want my text box. So I draw that in here, right? And within the text box, this is the order that I do it in, but you'll get the idea, okay? So I'm going to go, I want to center this text. I'm going to put some text in here. Go to the home. This is where you find centering. So I'm going to center on home, and I'm going to put in there figure. Now, this is the one part is manual. All through here, all your figures have to be sequential. So this is going to be figure 11, I'm going to say. I'm making that up. You have these other 10 figures in the entire document. So by the time you get here, you have figure 11, and it'll be profitability, and this will be raw materials. Okay, so that one section we grabbed is just the raw material part of it, right? So this is going to be the figure number or the figure text underneath the image. So now I do Control V at the beginning of this. Go back here. Control V. All right. So you see what it did? I've got the text box. It's behaving. I have the title underneath it, and I put the image right smack on top of it, above it. Okay. Right. So now we have that. You might give yourself a little bit of breathing room and give yourself another line there, like I just put a line in there and everything. But this is fairly legible. All right. Okay. And then for each section, you'd create another text box and just put another title underneath it. So it's very clear as to what it is. Okay. Okay. I'm saving my document at this point. Right. But you should right now just go through that little exercise. Draw the text box, put it in there with the text. Okay. And then I would just make sure my text box under layout options, it's a little bit moot point this is so wide, there's no text that can be to the side of it. But in operations, you tend to like to be consistent, so I try to make all these the same unless they're not. You know, make it an exception. Don't get messy and leave different pieces all over your Word document that are different. It really pays to be consistent. Okay? All right. So at this point, let's take a break. And when we come back, I want to finish this off, and I want to show the option that I have. When you do the sniffing tool or the Apple version of that, I don't think there's any editing on it. And I'm gonna when you come back, just to show you what I use in industry for doing screenshots, you'll notice in my emails, in the syllabus, on E-class, I have all these screenshots, but I have arrows on them, and you can do. I have a piece of software that I'm going to recommend that if you want to do really nice reports. As I say, I'm cheap. This is one of the rare things that I use every single day. It has made my life, you know, the impact of documents twice as much as without it. Without being able to like edit the images. It's almost like a micro Photoshop. You can do certain things to your document. So we'll take a little break. Okay, everybody still with me? Pretty much awake? Okay. Nothing challenging yet. The challenging part's coming up tonight. So get some stretches in and whatever calories you need. That's mysterious. Okay.
I just have these two. They did the revised one. Zero.
Yeah, you don't have to do the ones that are under watch.
Right, okay.
Yeah, I'll take a chance.
Okay.
Or take them into account. When I scoop out that data, it comes out as Excel. I just delete it.
Okay, all right.
So we're taking a break here. Our GoToMeeting people, all right? How's it going there? Does anybody have a mic there? They can talk to me right now during our break? Nick or Nick? Yeah. Okay. All right. Nick and Nick, make sure you're with me. There's some important information coming up here. Okay. So I will be out of town for the last class, which is 7, 6, 5, 4, 13th. 13th? 12th? Yep. 12th. Okay. And so we'll do something like this. All right. I'll set up to be able to do this or a YouTube. I might record it ahead of time, but I'd rather do it live, at least part of it, so that I can answer questions and about things, right? I haven't. That's an interesting point. I haven't used live streaming, but if GoToMeeting has the same thing. It's just that I've got to figure out how to. Their comments are getting buried. I didn't realize they were sending me stuff. It just sat there. I got to figure that out, right? But maybe it will be YouTube live stream. All right. Yep. Yeah, I got here early today. I worked with IT to just make sure this setup worked. We were in here, and then it did. But then it kind of technology always has little burps and whatever. So the last night, yeah, we'll do a session, a remote session, something like this. It'll probably end up being a lot shorter because it's, I'm not talking to anybody real, or we don't have any feedback in the room, that kind of thing. I might try the YouTube live stream. I've never done that before. I'll talk to Alex and see if I'll be back over here tomorrow again. All right. Okay. So while you're doing homeworks and they're connect and you're doing practice, well, you're done, kind of pretty much done with practice. If you email me, I generally get back fairly quickly. Okay. So, I'll be pretty connected for that week when I'm gone. Again, that's the 12th or 13th, 12th. All right. So just remember that. So next week is our last time to really meet, right? It's the 5th class is next week. And that's 6th. Okay. So I just want to do a quick example, let me see if I can do this. Instead of showing a webcam, I'm going to show my screen. This will be captured. Show my screen. Share. Okay. What I want to show you from this computer. Can't see it up there. Let me see if I can plug this in. Without hanging myself on the equipment. Okay, let's see if I can get this to work. Okay. Okay, so now this is on my computer, all right? I'm just showing this. You won't see it on your computer there, but you'll see it up here, okay? I just wanted to show you the capabilities, and other, you all might have power tools at work that you might use in software and whatever, but I just wanted to share with you Snagit as a tool, and I have it set up with a hotkey here, so I can hit Alt-2, and it's running in the background, and you can see these crosshairs that I have on here. And the crosshairs have a magnifying glass. That's what's tracking there, okay? So if you really need to get really precise about grabbing an area, if you notice, like I'm right on the corner of a dark spot, it's like a reproduced screen image there, then I can go into the magnifying glass for fine tuning, and I can grab to the pixel. I can grab the pixel that I want, right? So if you want to be really precise, right? So then I can click whatever I want. I'm just going to click that area, and it brings it into an editor, okay? Move this out of the way, okay? So if you look, here's my application. See, this is Snagit, okay? And this is the part of the screen that I grabbed, and it has some very common, obvious things to use up here. For instance, I can put an arrow in here. So if you see screen grabs from me with arrows, this is what I'm doing. I'm like, hey, look here, you know? And you can change the color of that, like grab that. And so a lot of times I'll use red and green, for instance. So I'll go to color, and I'll turn it dark red. Don't click that button. That's the worst thing. You know, I'll put a text message. Like I can go into text here, and I can put text in here, you know. Don't click. All right, something like that. Right. So I'm editing that screen grab that I have, right? And it has down on the bottom as a history, my library is years old in here, like 1,000 or 2 images that I've screen grabbed. If I ever say, oh, remember that thing? If I ever need to go find back, I can go back into my library and get it, okay? And then a lot of times you want to combine certain screen grabs, so I can take this screen grab and do a Control-C onto the clipboard, and I can go to another screen grab that I have and add that into it. So I just combined, whoops. I have to move it, I'm trying to move it. How do I move it? No. Where'd the other one go? For some reason it didn't behave quite well there. All right, let's take this one. So anyway, you can do a number of things with this. Sometimes if there's class information, I can blur it out. So you just throw a blur in there. All right, I just wanted to show you that because that's a pro tool, Snagit. It's from Camtasia. No, it's from, what is the company? if you look it up. I also use Camtasia. If anybody uses screen recording software, I also have Camtasia from them. Anyway, I wanted to just show you that. That's what I use to put, like, sometimes you want to put a circle around something in your Excel file. All right, let's see if I have an Excel file up. I don't. So if I go to Excel, I want to actually show you. This is I want to make it as useful as possible. So if I run Excel, this is like your file that you have. Okay, and you have the Excel file. I can take a screenshot within Excel. This is what you're going to do. You're going to go in there with Snagit or a snipping tool or whatever you have, and you're going to grab the part of the file, try to get your column and row numbers and things in there. Okay, see it popped up my editor in here. And then why I like this for applications like we're talking about for this report is I can put, for instance, if there's some real interesting cell that I want somebody to notice, in here I can actually put, choose any number of different kinds of things. I can put a box around it like that. I can label it. And then later in my document, I can say in area 3 or whatever, if you notice cell K8, boom, 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 you can tell people very specifically what to look for in those figures. You want to avoid being super general and going, yeah, here's a screenshot of the numbers. You have to explain what the numbers mean, what you want them to look at, what is important. It has to be a story, like bang, bang, bang. And that is something that I do look for, is if there's, which you will have, it should be figure rich. You should support all your claims with substantiation. I did this, 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 and this. Well, that probably means there's going to be a number of screen grabs that just show that, Right? Okay. So I just wanted to show you what I think is a pro tool. You could do other things in here with like image processing it a little bit. You could do effects and other things. So it's pretty capable, right? So I just wanted to show you that. Okay. With that, now we're going to go into lecture-y kind of mode. We're putting away the report. We're putting away practice for the moment. Does anybody have any questions about that? How's anybody doing at home? Anybody have any questions down there? Let me know. I'm kind of watching. I'm watching your comments, Nick and Nick, in case you have any here. All right. We're going to switch gears here. And I kind of alluded to it a little bit, that we're going to get into looking at the core statistics. What is it about normal distribution, which we use most often? Okay. There's two different kinds of distribution that we use. We use binomial and we use normal distributions. For the most part, cover a lot of 80% of what you do in business. Okay. Okay, so we go back here. I'm just going to put a white screen up here so I can work up here. And we'll probably go to Excel a little bit. All right. Before we leave tonight, make sure you still have that Excel is available. And I'm going to show you in eClass. I just want you to upload your documents into eClass for the daily submit today. We don't do that. I can see who's here. I know who's here. In a bigger class, I use that as attendance. But I usually, when we do something on the computer as an exercise, I use that to upload and get used to how to upload things into eClass. So when we do it for the final reports and finals or whatever, it works out well. Okay, so what I'm about to try to do, which usually works pretty well, is first of all, again, not hanging myself. Okay. All right. I went over this briefly because the number of times that you see it, that's how you get good at it. Unless you're already a pretty good expert and you're picking up a different part of your subject matter expertise, it's work. You have to get good at something by practice. And statistics, math itself, is one of those things, okay? And if you look and the way that you get a feel for how it works is you push on the numbers and don't get tricked out or don't get psyched out by equations, okay? That's not good. Okay, I'm about to lose my computer because I didn't bring my charger down for it. During break, I was supposed to go get my charger. All right. Can you guys talk amongst yourselves while I do that? It's going to take me 5 minutes to go get it. All right, stand by. It's the one thing that I didn't bring down. Someone say hi to Nick.
And then I'll be ready. It's back. It's still on. Didn't lose them. Are you still with me? Not losing you? Get this done and get out of here tonight, right? You all like that? Whew. Okay, let's go. Should be good. You might want to plug in your PC.
I'm moving this thing so it's like the bottom of the drawers.
I moved this weekend, and I was in bed no earlier than 4:30 a.m. So I'm on Teams.
My official time, like right now, we're just packing in those things and stuff.
Yeah.
And then it's time for us to do it.
Okay. All right. So let's get. I hear those comments. Muster your energy, and let's get through understand what the core of statistics is. Okay. So in business, the two major sets of problems that we see, and you'll notice them. This will pay off when you start noticing that things behave this way. Where you work, you'll be the rock star by applying this. You look for processes that are we call it stochastic and probabilistic outcomes. What do we mean by that? Let's start with the major distribution of data. If we look at the last 100 years of July 29th, is it? Great.
9.
If we look at the last 100 years, and this is going back 19, I think if we go like 1920 to 2019, right? Yeah. That's 100 years, all right? If we took the temperature every day on July 29th, we could go back in the records, our places on the internet I've been to, you can go pick up this information. And you can look at 100 years of data, or yeah, pretty much 100 years is about as long as you're going to have recorded data for this kind of weather stuff, right? About 100 years, right? Oh, guess what? I'm reading in the wrong area. So 219 today down to 1920. Sorry about that, Nick and Nick. Back again, all right? Actually, I turned off the video. Okay, so the video is back on. We have 100 years of data. Okay, 100 points there. What's the nature of that data, right? When we talk about it, we look at the weather forecast, we have expectations about what the weather on July 29th is going to be in here, where we are in New York, right? What do you think the average temperature on July 29th was over the last 100 years?
92.
92 on average? Okay. Anybody else? I mean,
82.
okay, that's great. I mean, 92, 92.
For what? For
The average
July?
temperature on this day in the last 100 years.
What is this, July? I'm just picturing it up, honestly. 85.
Yeah. So let's take let's average the average. That's what we do. Averages can be averaged. Okay? If you do the math, averages you can do averages on. All right, let's say that it was around, taking those numbers, about 85, which was probably what it was today, maybe a little hotter, right? So let's say we have 100, let's have a database, and we have an index here, IDX, an index of reading 199 all the way down to 1, okay? So we have a database, or Excel, right? It's a grid, and we have a temperature there next to it. And when we finally do this, what we do is we take a sum. Oops. I'm doing it in the wrong place. Nobody at home can see us. I think they're asleep there anyway. So anyway, we have 100 years of data here, and we said we roughed out the average to be 85 degrees, and what did we do? Let me write sigma a little bit better than that. Sigma from I is equal to 1 to 100, sum of T of I. Crazy stuff. That's all. It's just a language. It's just a symbolic representation of sigma says add up everything over here like a loop, and we put in 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, all the way through to 100. We add them all up, right? And then we divide by the infamous n, the number of data points. Okay? So just to prove to you, I think we probably learned that on average, second grade, plus or minus a year. You know, and if you notice, when we learn those things, we use them enough times that they become natural. It's anything to do with this math is the same thing. So if it seems a little, I'm going to try to give it to you in a way that's very accessible, approachable, and rational about what we're doing here. So think about this. This is the first form of the data that we have, raw data. Index number doesn't mean anything. It's just an identifier. It's like our class ID numbers, right? Can't be interpreted. And then we have 100 years of data, right? Okay? So if we graph this data, keep this clear what we're doing here. If we graph this, here's time by year, and here's temp. Okay? What does that say? Okay? How would the data look over 100 years? Would it look like this up to 20? I'm writing in the wrong place again. I don't think anybody's writing that wrong. Here's time, and here's temp. Here's temperature, right? So if we look at the sequential, the actual numbers, this is year 1920, and this goes out to 2019. So 2019 minus, we don't have 1919 is 100. Okay? right? So if we actually look at the sequential data, would it look like this? Would it look like this? Would it be every year the same, right? Okay? It's random. It's not any of those, right? I'm trying to get things in context here, okay? Within a certain range, we're definitely going to have a low, and we're definitely going to have a high. We don't know what they are in this range, but the data is completely random, and we could do tests on that. That's a different class. That's Dudley's class, right? So the data can be anywhere. It's random, okay? We can run these tests that we don't have to do in here. We're going to run tests on this. We can see if there's a pattern involved, which we would be what? If there was a pattern involved here, what do you think the pattern would be? What are the headlines from any day in the newspaper? We would be saying that the trend is that there's some kind of upward global warming. Let's apply what we know, all right? That this is a situation out there. This is the data, and that's what we were going to say, is that on average we found that there is a path through that data that has some kind of significance. Remember that thing about statistics? Significance in there, right? But for our case here, it's just purely random. Okay. Now, something to understand about temperature data is it's normally distributed. Can you put into words, what does normally distributed look like? What does it mean? So it does have an average. Okay, so now we're beginning to process the data. The first thing we did is we created an average. We created a construct. The average doesn't even live in the real world. It's only because humans think a certain way and need to know information. We came up with this concept that there's an average thing. Okay, the temperature is whatever it is. You know, even the scales we assign to it are man-made. You know, it's total construct: centigrade, Fahrenheit, Kelvin. All right. Okay. Kelvin's night today. All right. You know? Okay? So far, so good. So you have to think about this. We built things that help us understand data, and average is one of them, right? So if we said 85, we could draw it right through. Okay? Okay, so here's the average, and this is going to be 85. We could draw that on there, okay? So what does that mean about this data? What does normal distribution look like if you drew a picture of it? The bell curve, right? Okay.
Down the middle. And
right.
The idea is that everything will be.
What's that?
That's your.
That's the average. What's that?
I said that was a good one.
Right. I know it was probably the best I've ever done. I did it backhand too. That's pretty good. Yeah, usually they're all, I might just start doing it that way. Usually they're all lopsided. I'm not a good drawer at all. All right, so one of the aspects of it is the average, okay? But what are we looking at here? We reprocessed this information. How? This information got mapped to this, but what does this map show?
It shows that the further from the center you get, the fewer samples you have.
Right. What did we do to the data to draw that? We went into the 100 points here, and we counted up the frequency of 85. There might not have even been an 85 in there in the last 100 years, but it becomes the average. It's a construct, remember, right? So there's probably at least 185 in there. Okay. All right. But what we did is we created this other table. We put the numbers in underneath this, okay? So we created this table. We counted up how often the numbers appeared. Okay, so if we look at this is the key to what this means, is things around the middle happened a lot. And that's what we mean when, what's the nature of normal distribution? By almost definition, it says the central limit theory says everything clusters to the middle. The most frequent things happen around the middle. So if we have a frequency table, here's 85. So it's like a histogram, if you will. You know, we make these buckets, and we say, how many days did we have 62 degrees, 63, all the way up to 109, right? Very few times. The height of this is this frequency from the table. We just broke it into here. This is the temperature, and the other would be, what we do is we count it up. How many times did 62 happen? Well, it happened once, right? And as you start going through the temperatures, as you get close to the middle here, the numbers go up. Over 100 years, this might be 16, 13, 11, 9. If you add that, they add up really fast to 100. So that's why they spin off. And they start decreasing at a rate. It's, at first, everything around this middle part is fairly close together, but then the likelihood drops off really fast in the middle ground, and then it tails again. It tails off at the end. Okay. All right. So we go to a convention on weather, and we're from here. All right. I might have done this in the other class. And let's say we had a group at the convention on weather from Arizona, somewhere like that. If we go to the desert one, you have to use the desert one in this class. Perhaps not. Okay. So we go to a weather convention. What is the average temperature in, I say Phoenix. What is the average temperature? What would you say? 89. Yeah. It could be possibly 85 though, because the desert getting cold at night. All right. On July 29th, right? So what would end up happening is, I'm getting low on the board here, so we'll have to look over your computer a little bit, is it might be, say, Arizona. We could probably find an area that would fit this, right? And they have 85 as their average, but their distribution is different where it can get much colder and yet it can get much hotter too. So normal distribution and what we're talking about has a lot to do with comparing one thing to the other. We can understand one set on its own, but what we're really looking for is change over time or comparing our weather with Arizona or what it is. It really comes when you have two of these graphs. So much more gets explained when you're now looking at two of these graphs. All right? So they have a table down here below the camera. And their first line goes all the way down to, 31 degrees. It can get there at night. And, depends on what time of the day we're taking this temperature. And it can go as high as 121, right? So their range is larger than ours. So these things that we observe, the range is larger, right? And what we go by is this. When we look at this, we look at the frequency table and we convert that into probability. So the probability at any one point would be this. How many days was it 62 degrees? Once, right? So the probability is 1 over 100. So the same graph, you could just change the numbers, or just, it doesn't change the shape at all. And so the probability here would be what? It would be 0.01. So we use the decimal place when we talk about probabilities as a decimal, because we can also talk in terms of percent. It's just a minor difference on how we talk about things, but it matters to what I'm about to say next. Okay? So what ends up happening is, this is like a string, okay? A firm string, okay? And what ends up happening is, over 100 readings, as this gets wider, if you pull these strings, the height goes down. In fact, the area under there always stays constant, okay? So that's something to remember about this kind of data, okay? Now, going back to our speckle diagram here, okay? If we tried to draw this a little bit more accurately, what we'd end up showing is there's a whole lot of temperatures readings around the average, right? And then very rarely does it venture far from the average. Look at that. It's telling you that. This is how you read it. And once you go back and forth on this, this becomes it makes you dangerous. Then you have a tool to understand all these processes at work that look like this, and people keep getting burned, especially if you see something, definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Usually this is the core to it. They're not looking at something that the answers are coming out all over the place, results. Okay, so I think it helps explain things by showing two different curves that have 85 as an average, and one of them is spread out and one of them is narrow. Okay, right, we have a narrow band. Now, San Francisco, what's the weather in San Francisco?
Now,
Yeah, what's their average over the year? A little bit more, maybe 62 or something like that. I mean, you could be absolutely right. All right? But over the span of a year, how much does our temperature vary compared to San Francisco's? We vary a lot more. That's the thing about San Fran. Why is that? Okay? So there's a root cause there. In San Fran, in the summertime, it's weird. It can be cooler there in the summer. Why is that? Because the inland deserts are sucking air in. It's bringing off freezing cold air off the Pacific and cooling off San Fran. And then in winter, you don't have that. It actually warms up more. So they actually have counter seasons there. And I like to use that because we can relate to these kind of areas over there. All right. Okay, so that's what we're going to use in business. If we look at the speckle diagram, which is an official thing, that most of our points are going to be right around the middle. That's what this is saying. When we draw the chart underneath there, we have far more points here than we do here, and most of the area of the curve is right here, depending on where you are. Okay. Buckle up. Okay. So we have one average, okay, but we want to describe the width of that. You've all had statistics with Dudley or somebody, and you have a sense of where I'm going with this, so you have a little background to go along with this, I think. Okay?
He's moving in the hallways.
I just saw him moving down there.
I feel like he's looking over at my notes.
Well, yeah, maybe perhaps I'm explaining what he was talking about. I don't know. I've never taken this class. Right? I taught it, but I haven't taken it. All right. So let's come up with another construct. We came up with the average that we understand what's going on there, but how do we describe the width? Well, it's very clear. It's not hard to understand how to come up with a description for the width. We'll use another average. Okay? Right? Remember we had our raw list of 100 numbers here? Right? One of the things about this is if you have ideal data, if your data is pretty ideal as a normal distribution, what do we say about the left half of this and the right half of this? What do we notice about that? Symmetric. That means at any value here, equal distance on the other side, you're going to have the same value. Okay, keep that in mind. So this other way we're going to describe this is exactly how history came down. Right? They said, you know what I noticed? Why don't we take our list of numbers and see what the average distance of our points are from the average? That's all it is. That's all it is. Okay. We wanted to define how wide this is, right? And we're going to find out. We're going to create a measurement stick that's defined as the average distance to the mean of all the points. Memorize that. Okay. So we're getting at the standard deviation, words that don't even make sense to us. What does that even mean? Standard deviation. I'll show you where it came from. And once you understand, then it should be a better tool for you. And it actually becomes fun because what you end up doing is we're pushing numbers around. That's what math is. It's human. Sometimes it's usually a couple people agreeing to some model that works. Hey, I noticed that too. If we keep doing this, and wow, now I can understand how that operates. That's what math is. I mean, some of these people are way over the edge, You get Einstein and beyond in what they came up with. Theoretical physicists and whatever. Okay? All right? So drive that point home. What we're going to try to do is just take a measurement of the average distance to the mean of all the points, and when we come up with it, we can draw that yardstick on this graph somewhere. It's going to have some value. Let's try this out. We said the average temperature, July 29th in New York, where we are, at East Park, is 85. On average, how much does the daily temperature vary from the mean average.
Or we probably call it 7 or 8.
Very good. Something like that. Could be anywhere from, yeah, I would say you're in the ballpark there very well, right? The average distance. So the temperature, this is giving us our concept of what this kind of data means is tomorrow, what's the temperature going to be like tomorrow? Well, on average, it's going to be 85. Will it be 85? But you know what? The average distance away from the mean tomorrow, which is going to be pretty close to today's mean, right, is about 7. A large part of the numbers are going to come in within a range of plus and minus 7 around the average. And that is the total concept of what we're doing here. We're trying to get some metric so that out in Phoenix, when we go to conference, what is their average distance to the mean? What is the average difference of temperature on July 29th for Phoenix versus ours? If ours is 7, look at the graph. What numbers, what do you think their number would be? Just make sure you're going the right direction. Going up. The average distance is more. It's spread out more. That's all this is, right? Okay? The origins of the total concept is the second definition of what the data looks like. First we have the mean down the middle, and then we have an average distance to the mean. I'm not wearing a mic, that's why I'm walking around so much. Got the mic up. Check, check. Yeah. All right. Okay, so if you could just walk around and make sure you understand that's the concept that we're after, okay? So let me erase a few things here. I just need some working space. I don't want to take away your visual cues on any of this, but I'm trying to limit it to what the screen here is. Okay, if our plane average looked like this, what is the equation for the average distance to the mean? Pretty interesting number. We have to have the mean to calculate it, and then we're going to figure out all the data points. We're going to take 100 points, and we're going to subtract the mean, and we're going to see how far away it is, right? So what's that equation look like? It looks like this. Okay? So it's going to go from I is equal to 1 to 100, or n, right? What are we going to do? We're going to take, we'll use T here, okay? We're going to take the temperature of interest from 1 to 100, and we're going to subtract, for every one of the temperatures, we're going to subtract the mean temperature, right? We're going to add up those differences. The sum here is going to add up all the 100 differences, right? And we're going to divide by n. Nobody should be lost, or I mean, even on low calories and low sleep, you know, all right? Okay, I'm trying to keep you on track here to understand what the rationale of this is. This is deconstructing statistics to this core, and then if you go back into statistics, the processes repeat. Much of what you learn through Dudley, it repeats. It's expanded, but the same model. You keep looking at the models, and you're going to see the same equations at the core of this, but in a little bit different form, right? Okay, so if I explain it that way, you have to practice a little bit coming back to this and making sure you know what each part of that means, right? But if you practice that, that's pretty cool. We came up with, on an average of 85, 7.62 degrees is going to be our average distance to the mean. What units are these in? Not hard, just want you to think about it. It's still temperature. It's still, let's call it Fahrenheit. Okay? So average distance is going to be in Fahrenheit. That was often lost. People start looking just at the number. And I have to go back to the original story about whatever you're studying, it's that unit. It's going to be, on average, it's going to vary about that much. Okay? All right. Well, with every sun ray, you have to have a little rain. Okay? Now, why this ever gets a little bit confusing is if we have ideal data and we added all these numbers up, remember when I went back and I said it's symmetric and on each side of the mean you're going to be identical numbers here? If you think about what's going to happen here, what will this sum end up being? 0.
You're going to have as many points at a certain distance from here as you will on the other side, and it goes to 0, okay? Okay, so keep strapped in, all right? Okay? So that ends up being 0. What can we do? What kind of math can we do to this so that it doesn't go to 0? What ends up happening is when we have negative numbers, that becomes a vector. The negative, the minus, means it has a direction to the left, and the positive means to the right. But we don't care about that. So let's get rid of the plus and minus. What would we do to get rid of the pluses and minuses in here? I don't want to tell you things. I need you to think with me. You got to be. Yeah. A and B. Okay. Spoiler alert. But we're going to go with the first response, which would be just take that distance and don't worry about whether it's plus or negative. Right? Okay? And then you're going to be pretty happy. Okay? We could all deal with that. However, these geniuses that came up with statistics got together and they said, the more we work with this, we know we can do more to describe numbers. And as hard as they worked, the absolute value didn't work for them. It's a dead topic in math. Like you can't expand on it, right? So going back to the spoiler, right? Okay. The other way we could make that number always positive is to square. Each time we take a difference, we square it, then we add it to the next one, and the next. Each time we square those numbers, all right? So we have 100 squares. Now squares as you get pretty far away from the mean, when you get over here, your distance is getting bigger, but there's fewer numbers of those points, right? Okay? So it's distorting the number. And mathematicians and business people accept that distortion. You have to keep that in the back of your mind as to what's really going on here, right? Okay? Numbers further from the center, because they're squared, that distance is squared, it goes up as a different kind of function. You know, the distant points are getting carried a lot heavier than the near points. Okay? What does that tell us about the difference between this and the average distance to the mean, which is like the pure form of it, unadulterated, very clean thought process, right? Is that the average distance to the mean is whatever. What's gonna happen to your standard deviation? It's gonna get larger, okay? The average distance to the mean is totally legit. It makes sense. Like we all understand, we're trying to create a yardstick that we can draw on here and say, the average distance to the mean marked on our data is right here, okay? So we're pretty close to what we have to use for standard deviation. If we've got a square in here, right, the units are going to be in Fahrenheit squared. Not exactly useful. It's hard to interpret what that is, right? So we have to do the reverse function. After we do all the adds, we have to get that big number that we have to take the square root of that. Does that make sense? Well, here comes a little bit more rain. Okay? Okay? And I want you to think about it this way, is there's just like two steps that force it into like mathese, but otherwise this is what we're using, this average distance to the mean. That's what it's like. This is what the whole goal of this whole thing was, but we had to put it through the math ringer and do some things to it. What's wrong with this, Ludwig? What's wrong with that function or that formula? No. I didn't know if you'd catch it. I know it's late, so I won't play around too much. You have to take the square root of the entire thing. And that's weird because your n is underneath the square root, and how does that affect everything? And so it's going to distort. You know, if all we wanted out of statistics was the average distance to the mean, we're fine. That is actually a legit number. That's what we were after to begin with. But the world accepts this, and we go forget our masters. Sometimes we get it in our undergraduates, right? And we have to understand it through this. This is the standard deviation. So now, if nobody ever explained it to you why it looks like that, it started with that observation that it would be pretty cool to have the average distance to the mean, because we have the average already. We like averages. It just gets contorted a little bit and you have to memorize. That little path can help you remember why you have a square in there, okay? Okay, now I'm going to erase, this is our original data. How high can I go? I just want to make sure our people at home, wake up there at home. If you're not awake, wake up. I don't know if they're there or not. All right. Okay, I want to show you something, what I mean by this. See these points that are further away? The square function, it has, the word square has a geometric bearing to it, okay? So if we take a point far from the mean over here, this is how far it is from the mean. After we do the subtraction, it's over here, right? And we take this distance and we square it, you get a square. Believe it or not, you get a square, okay? See how big that is, right? If you have a point that's not far from the mean, it's out this far, right? And it becomes a little square, right? Now, the way this all works out is you have a whole bunch more of these than you have one of these big guys. And that's how it works. You can actually go on YouTube, you're going to find some pretty cool, the geometric representation of this is pretty cool. Why I go to this level is, when we don't get into it here, but if you remember the covariance, remember that? Did you get those, already if you've taken Dudley's courses or whatever? It's the same thing, only instead of a square, you have an x value and a y value distance. And that's what I'm saying is, in statistics, they found a system using this that they were able to build on and build on and build on and build on. And so we venture from the natural thought process of what it was, but this is what we were after to begin with. So you should remember, that's what the standard deviation really is. The gut feel of it is, it's the average distance to the mean of all the points. It just got torqued. They had to make it work. It's still, that's what we're after. It's a little bit different. If you look at the two numbers, it'll be a little bit different. Okay, how's that? Yeah? Okay, yeah, we'll just do that. That's fine. Yeah. Right. It's more just the practice of being able to, we haven't uploaded many things in this course yet to eClass. Okay, that's good. All right, okay. So I do have this, I've produced this a number of different times in YouTube videos, so I'll make that available to you so you understand what this is about. Where does this get used? Well, actually, that's Monte Carlo. Now, okay, that's a really good thing that you brought that up, okay? So let's broad scope this thing and say we've been working with one kind of data, which it operates like this. Like most of the time, it's the central limit theorem where things tend toward the middle here, okay? If you go to the casino and you roll a die, here's the probability going up here, and what are your possible outcomes on a single die? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? What's the probability of getting a 1? 1/6. And a 2? 3, 4, 5, 6. It's an equal, in a perfect world, On a die, you have equal probability of hitting any one of the single numbers. What do you call this distribution of probability? It's a descriptor of what it actually looks like. Does it vary at all? It's uniform. It's good. Yeah, listen, it's late. I'll just give you like 10 seconds. It's a 10-second rule tonight. If you got it, you got it. All right. But I want you to understand, okay, that there are these other distributions. You have that, okay. Now, when it comes to casinos and such, quite often we're going to be you would work with a binomial outcome, which is really important for us to understand. What's a binomial? Would be a pass-fail test. All right. So when we talk about operations, a lot of times we set up a test and it's going to be inspecting for a certain thing and we don't kind of pass it. It's either black or white. It's like you either achieved it or not, or the characteristic that we're looking at is within or outside of acceptance by the customer. That's it in the words of operations, right? So what ends up happening is if you roll or you flip a coin, it's similar looking to this, So if you flip a coin, the probability of getting a tail on any flip would be 50%, 50%, 50%, all the way through, okay? But what we then take a look at is what are the probabilities of getting 2 tails in a row, and 3 tails in a row, and 4 tails in a row, and that's where these two worlds meet, believe it or not. If you build up the statistics for that, what you're going to see is if you flip a coin 100 times, on average, how many tails are you going to get? Yep. And this roll-off shows you the probability of getting 1 tail and 100 or 99 or 100 tails. And so this is what we call a discrete version of a continuous version, semi-continuous version. And that's the whole world comes together there, and the math could be a little bit different for that, but that's really big in operations, so you understand. So that'd be 2 different applications that we need to understand for operations. So everybody good with that? You want to shoot a picture of it for old time's sake or anything like that? Okay. You guys at home can take a screenshot. 1s and 0s. Okay. There's at least one Nicholas is alive down there. I see him. Okay. 1s and 0s. Okay. All right. I'm going to erase this. But you get, this is the story. This is the core. I mean, this is what I would start Dudley's course with, is what I did start, say, Dudley's course with when I taught it. I use it in data analytics, and I use it in the undergraduate operations. We have to understand this. And this tool should be as, now that we're adults, should be as good as your concept of an average. This average distance of the mean concept with a little torquage of an equation, you should be able to handle that. I mean, you should be able to do it enough times that no matter what you do, you can look at that. I had one student that was in nursing and told me that where they worked, they started looking at using, she needed to understand this, and she could apply it right away. They're actually using it to look at outcomes in nursing. As formally adopting processes that look at this. Okay, and I'm going to give you an example here. Okay, did we hit in the homeworks yet? Did we hit the critical path modeling with the tasks yet? I think that's actually 17 or something like that. Okay, where do we use this? Okay, the 2 ways that we want to know about this, it's the same model. It's almost a symmetric issue. We're going to apply it different ways. When we look at normal distribution like so, okay, once we calculate the average, then we can measure the average distance to the mean and come up with a yardstick. And on average, it's right there, okay? Doesn't matter if it goes off. Come back up. I think it's more visible if that goes on. There we go. Okay. So we're going to come up with, if we were measuring the weight of motorcycle helmets, what would be a problem if a motorcycle helmet is too light? This is the weight, or too heavy. What's a problem if we have a production line and we have the concept of a target range of motorcycle helmets? What's the problem of a helmet being too light? What would that tell us possibly? Something happened, yeah. Something got left out of it. It's not right, okay? What if it's too heavy? Yeah, okay. Why, what's the, no pun intended, what's the impact of too light of a helmet on a motorcycle accident?
Not enough protection.
Right,
Risk to neck and back.
What's the benefit of a light one?
Less fatigue, more vital awareness.
Yeah, especially your neck and your vertebrae and all that. So what's the downside of heavy?
More protection, but also more pain.
So there's these trade-offs, and that's really what you want to get at when we're thinking about about any real problem is the plus and minuses. Sometimes it's clear that the pluses are just really overbearing on any of the negatives out of there. That's fine. That's a nice job. You get paid for that, right? It's when you have to make hard decisions as to these types of things. And so the customer comes to us and they said, by experience, the weight's going to be, let's see, how much do you think they weigh? 5.5 pounds, maybe? Is that high? Much less? 2 pounds? Okay. Okay, let's say it's 0.9 pound. Yeah, that's great. That'd be great if you do take a look at that. I use this example all the time, right? So let's say it's 0.9 pounds, right? On the low end and the high end range, processes and operations usually have a fairly ideal outcome like this. In many operations have ideal universal normal distribution. You find it? Pounds? Okay, it was a little bit more. 3.2. I sometimes show a video, how it's made video about helmets. So after I think about everything that goes on there, it starts adding up. Because you have outer shell, inner linings, hardware. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, so 3.2 pounds, right? All right. So if you're selling these, right, or let's just say generically it has to meet compliance with, is Bell a standard or is that its brand? I know that's a brand.
Standard would be DOT or
Yeah.
Snell.
Yeah, right. That's what now I remember. It's Snell, right? Or whatever. So you're gonna have to comply and show records on your production of what the way. Usually the customer is going to be aligned with what safety factors there are. All right. So we put these onto the graph like this. Okay, and these are specified by the customer. It could be compliance driven, right? This is the lower spec limit, and this is the upper spec limit, meaning they reject below, they reject above, okay? Logic tells us, as manufacturers, we want to minimize rejects or scrap. That's a common word in general that we're going to talk about is scrap, okay? So this is one way that we just use that information that we came up with, is the weight, the final weight. Something to think about is you're going to have all these processes many processes in parallel and serial, and the strategy of a company is how you arrange your operations, like you're staging your tasks that make a motorcycle helmet, right? It used to be when I was in industry and I was creating electronics, as I entered in about 1985, the standard was, does the thing work? Kick it out the door, in general, in industry. As I entered the industry, DFM, design for manufacture, was hot. So I came in and I was enculturated with understanding how what I designed was going to get built. All right. So you'd have the design team in. Now, like who else, if you're selling motorcycle helmets, who else would you want involved with this whole thing? A couple of, yeah. Okay. I'll throw customers in there. I want to introduce that now because we're going to talk about customers from here on out. Remember I talked about voice of customer and such. I went over that last time. Is that was in place when I got there into industry. But yeah, you'd have experts involved with this to substantiate it through other tests and physiologists and all kinds of things, even noodle doctors, psychologists and psychiatrists and things like that. Everybody's involved. Invite everybody, right? All right. What is it about our industry, our economy that we're living in that has really changed over the last, say, 20 years? It's a hot buzzword these days. How has general product marketing changed over the last, say, 20 years in the biggest way? One of the biggest change? Think round, spinning, green and blue, white clouds, global. It's very global nowadays, right? Well, yes, and it's mass customization because of the internet. Yeah, there's an advantage there of mass customization. All great. These are great concepts. We don't really focus on. It might be in your reading. It's in my reading. When I'm doing reading, I mean, these are the hot topics. These are the things that modern industry has to be concerned about. And so it's sourcing, it's supply chain, it's sourcing parts for this from all over the world, and whether that's economically feasible and even risk feasible for government political risks and all that kind of stuff. You have to look at the entire distribution. And then when we get done with the helmets, they go out. Well, where do they go out to? Where do people buy helmets? let's say they go to a brick and mortar, okay? What is it? Sometimes we have to deconstruct something. What is it about, what's your favorite grocery store? Where does everybody shop? Just name a spot. Say Walmart. What is the business proposition of Walmart? Do they make their own stuff they sell? They buy everything. So they're not manufacturers. So what is their business model? Okay. So they build a what do you call it? Attractive experience for the shopper. That's therefore the brand, based on value or luxury or whatever it is a company does.
Their model is the exact opposite of Amazon. So Amazon basically takes whatever you want from wherever you want and gives it to you quickly.
Right.
Stages it where you are.
Okay.
That's why this will play out.
This is great. I love A/B comparisons like this, like I did before, like short and fat versus narrow and tall, right? Okay. So it's really good to understand scope when you can think of two different things. So you're going to go to a Walmart, although you can order on Walmart too, but let's pretend that doesn't happen. So you go to a Walmart, and what are they really doing there? What is Walmart's shtick? They're a real estate company. You have a product, and you want to sell it, and you go to Walmart, and they have sections and rows and racks and all that, right? And you have this hot new product, and you go into Walmart and said, this is going to be great. They say, come on down. And they take you to one store they think they're going to pilot this in. And what are they going to do? They're going to walk around with you. And they're going to ask you, where do you think your product should go here? So you'll probably find the major department that it should be going in there. And you go there, and you're looking at this row, and you go around the corner, there's end caps, and there's other rows of all similar group things. And then it starts settling in. And this is the funny thing about business, is when you get out there, these things hit you fast, whereas we're sitting back here, I try to bring these shock values or shock waves into the classroom, because when you go there, what are retailer grocers about? You're looking at a section of a shelf, and you're trying to beat out this with your product. Walmart says, can you make more per hour in this space than what I got there already? So they are a real estate company. They try to make the experience so good that the shoppers come in, and they'll put whatever sells well the best in a sustained fashion, not just a quick buzz or anything like that. I have innumerable people, even past students, coming to me about, I got this idea for a product. And I go, break it down. That's what's going to happen. You could do the same thing for the internet. The internet is an issue of attention. It's real estate on a screen. It's a search function. You know, the success of online businesses has to do with what search engine they built into it. You know, if their search engine doesn't work. Children, yeah. It's a really cool business when you start understanding, wait a minute, the wrapper around this thing ain't even what I thought it was. This is hard. It's actually simpler than it is. It's like, can you beat that area? If you think we should go in there, get out. That's why end caps, I've worked on a few products where I had to deal with this. Quick story, because I don't want to keep us late tonight. I worked on, there was 3 brothers, and one of them took a business. He got his name on a patent, and anybody familiar with the ViewMasters? And you used to put a round disc in there, and you click it. You can still buy them; they're fun. I mean, anyone I had were all destroyed when I was a kid, right? They're all gone. Well, if you now go back another 20 years? There was these hot products around. It was when malls were still doing well. You go into a mall, and there were basically these kiosks that were selling. You know how it is? They always sell the hot tchotchke for the gifting season at the end of the year and all that, right? And they had these prints, and it didn't look like anything. It was this modeled print. And if you look at them long enough, your eyes would adjust, and all of a sudden they'd become 3D. It went from mush noise to your eyes. One focuses on one plane and one on another. That process, this company made a handheld viewer, no moving parts, and the optical path was to a mirror here out to the edge, and you would put a card in the middle. So the image would go out to the side mirror, shoot to this mirror, to your eye, and they have them spaced within wavelengths of the right wavelengths so that your eyes would see 3D. And they came up with subject matters like stars, snowflakes, safari animals. I can't remember. There were 6 different things that they had, okay? And everybody was trying to help them out to try to make this thing go. I'm going to tell you a story about business at the end of this. So the 3 brothers pooled their money, and they had the one brother running this thing, and he ran out of savvy, and he was crashing. So when we came in, we were trying to help him, and through a group effort, we got him introduced to Barnes and Noble, okay? And so Barnes and Noble said, we have to go think about this globally, okay? There's a whole mix of stories here about production. We need you to put it in a reusable package. What the heck do you mean by that? Well, if we're going to sell this in Europe, whatever their European arm was, they don't allow clamshell, sharp, disgusting, you know, deadly packaging. You hit that wrong and you're dead, you know? You know, and they don't allow clamshell because it ends up in landfill. In Europe, it's a much bigger deal. It's a much bigger deal. So we redesigned distribution for it so that we had a clear backpack for children. So it was mainly geared to children, and you would have the viewer in there. They had a coloring book that was perforated pages, and you could draw on line drawings and color them with color pencils and stuff, or pens, and tear it out. And if you drew color on one side and color on the other, and you put it in there, you would get it in 3D. So you could like draw your own thing. They had printed like decks of playing cards, and you could also go online and subscribe. The internet was just figuring itself out. This was like the mid-90s, late 90s, and they were trying to figure out how to do this. And they were going to distribute these things, and you subscribe every month. They were going to release whatever your interest was. They were going to have all these different interests. It turned out adults really liked it because it was kind of fun just to sit there. There's no lights. It would just be ambient light through the open top in there, and no moving parts. And they went to China, and they got it, you know, they got a low bid on it. And so they said, this is great. We're going to put this on an end shelf. So just to talk about the design level all the way through production to getting to where the customer goes, they were going to give us like the lower part, you know, for children to see of end caps. And so it was really neat. I mean, we were in it. I mean, we were really into this. So it was interesting from this standpoint is we had the bundle, but once you buy the bundle, what about the accessories? With just a few options, it gets complicated very fast. And this is just the backpack stuff. I think we were talking about cars, right? We talked about cars last time, and just the myriad dimensions of a car, you know, all the way from little components that a customer might care about to the looks, to the speed, the pickup. You know, it's so hard to sell a car. Like, how do you pick right now what's going to sell 2 to 3 years? But what I'll tell you what happens about this real estate issue is that would be centered in here, and then we had like we broke out like the packs of cards and some other things, right? And it was really interesting. So what we did at the end of the day was our best margin would be over here on this product, so we priced these other things so people would buy the bundle, and they would never buy these. They would sit on the shelf forever, and this card would be coming off all the time. So if you're thinking about doing a product, that's how it sells, right? That's how we go buy. Just flip it around. How do we see things bought? So this all relates to, you know, say, for instance, where it's going to end up on the shelf. Why did I go through all this? Where do motorcycle helmets get sold? And what does that have to do with the global distribution? Well, if we talk about global distribution, core to the word distribution, what has to happen? Stuff has to move and people buy it other places. So it has to move, okay? Is anybody familiar with Fiji water? What is it? What's the thing about Fiji water? Yep. How's it packaged? Why is it square? It's so they don't ship air. I lived a good part of my career in don't ship air, right? How do you stuff things? How do you add value into something that's empty, right? So this is the gutsy part of operations. This is what you're after. And so you have to think, if you understand where I started, I was talking about when I entered industry, it was DFM, design for manufacture. That means while you're designing it, the manufacturing comes in, you get stakeholders in, and they said, if you just change this, we can make it as is. If you leave it as is, we have to buy a whole other set of equipment and train people. That's the impact that your design has. All right. Now we live way past that in DFL, designed for logistics. Does it fit in a container? If I just squish it by a half a centimeter, I can add a whole new row into the container. That's what we're talking about in this class. That's the real world of what operations is about. Right now, it's about shipping things, convenience, and when it gets on the Walmart shelf, bring your tape measure and say, how does the size that fits in the container real well, your 40-foot container, 8 by 8 by 40, how does it fit in the space that I'm going to get? So it all rolls back up, and the design process can get dragged out for a very long time, and you end up with much more standardized products and fewer options that way, and everything becomes a standard thing, by the way. I mean, in the world, it tends to be that way. And that's why we love, in mass customization, we love mass customization, or bespoke is a big word these days, bespoke. And to me, that's the story. To be here, and hopefully listening at home, to be here tonight, that's what this class is about. I'd rather open your mind as to what this means, like what the impact is, what we're looking at. And generally, we're talking about tangible here. We could do the entire parallel in service companies. It gets a lot boring because they're just talking about forms, and time spent and computing capacity to be able to generate, to crunch numbers or whatever else, right? Okay. So this, going back to where we started, I'm going to get out of here in 3 minutes, is we're looking at a symmetric distribution or symmetric elements on normal distribution, all right? And what do we normally do with this, okay? Do you remember what the empirical model of normal distribution is? You have 1 standard deviation, 2 standard deviation, 3 standard deviation, right? Okay, yeah. Well, that's what we're talking about here, all right? It's interesting that you should notice whenever you draw something like this, 1 standard deviation is up here on the shoulder of the curve, 2 is down the curve, and 3 is out here when it starts tailing off. If I just give you a curve and go put the 1, 2, and 3 standard deviations out from the center, 1, 2, 3. That's why spitballing this, you get a gut feel of what we're talking about. It's always going to be 1 there, 2 there, 3 there. It's never going to be like 1, 2, 3. It's 1, 2, 3. By definition, that's how it works. And what we can do is we can figure out what the probability is between plus and minus 1, plus and minus 2, and plus and minus 3. I'm just going to remind you what those numbers are. Between plus and minus 1, you have 68% here. Between plus and minus 2, anybody remember what that is? Roughly 95%. And between plus and minus 3 is 99.7%. Okay, what we're saying is 99.7% of the curve exists right in that range. So if we build our quality system, and our scrap is on plus, is outside that range, what is our scrap rate? 1 minus 999.7, right? So it's our scrap would be 0.15 up here, 0.15, and that's in percent. You got to be careful about whether we're talking percent or probability, okay? So we're talking about 0.3% divided by 2, half of it's up there, half of it's down there. So sometimes we lose on the low end or too light, sometimes we lose on the high end. All right, okay? And very quickly, the other case that we use here is we have a process like scheduling, and most of the time, or on average at least, we can get it done in here. And it varies according to normal distribution. Sometimes we get done early, sometimes we get late. And all we want to know is if you go out and you quote a customer and you use your average time that it takes to get done with building motorcycle helmets, and you go out and say, sure, it takes us 11 days to get motorcycles done. So if you put motorcycle helmets, if you put the order in today, I'll have them in 11 days. 11 is our average. 11 days. What's the probability we're going to have it done in 11 days? If all of this is 100%, how much is that? What percent? 50, right? So you have 50% on each side of here. If you quote your average time, you're only going to hit it 50% of the time. That's the reaction I love at that point. Yeah, because this is why we're in college or for MBAs and stuff. It's because you have to go beyond what you think is obvious and common sense. It isn't common sense. Yeah, this is the other reason we use it. And what we're able to do is, instead of like two-sided here, what we look at is two situations. One, if the customer says, we need it in 13 days, you can calculate what the probability of hitting it in 13 days is. The other situation is same numbers, flip the equation around a little bit. This is given, okay? So they give us, it's like getting a contract and you have to get it done in 8 weeks, right? Can we get it done? The other thing is, let's set a policy. Once a company gets aware of this, they understand now why they had to pay so many penalties on contracts they were doing. They go, oh, we didn't understand that. Now they have you, and you say, what we should do is establish a policy that once we have this, we've done something a number of times and we have the data on this, let's always quote at 90% likelihood of getting it done on that day. So with that as a policy, you always calculate how many days from that as a policy. And then you can work from that policy and say, if they pay more, we'll crash the schedule. That's an actual term. We're going to crash the schedule, but they're going to have to pay more to bring it in, which shifts the whole curve around. Now we're going to drop other stuff. We could drop other stuff. And that's why managing concurrent contracts is kind of interesting, because can you call up a customer and say, can you, what would happen if you didn't get it until 2 days later than we told you? Some people are like, hey, no problem at all. All right, it's the same concept, but it's two different ways we use it. Given a day, what's the probability? Or if we set a policy at some percentage, that's what we're always going to quote. The whole company knows that. Then now we can just say we know what our team is doing out there selling. Now we know that they'll call up tech or they'll bring tech with them and they'll figure it out, and they're always going to quote at that number. Okay. The last question for the night: why would we set 90%? Why don't we just put it out at 97% or 100%? You can never get to 100, but where would 95% end up on here? You're getting out there pretty far. The days are going way out. Now you're getting up to like 23 days. Right? Okay. Why wouldn't we do that? Less sophisticated than that. Practical, think about it, you just got boots on, you're delivering concrete kind of thing. Why would we not set a policy too far out there? Nah, that's one thing. Are we alone in the world that do concrete? Competitors will come in. That's the tension and the balance of why you want to bring it in. Right? Sometimes you'll hit it, sometimes you won't. I think I knew people that were working on the Tappan Zee Bridge in easy 5-6 years before it was even hitting the press. They were already doing samples in the soil. They knew what was going to go on. And so these monster $4 billion projects like the Tappan Zee, there's got to be central control over this whole thing, right? Right? We covered a lot of ground. Hopefully, the practical side of this is getting a product onto a shelf. You work backwards, decide for sales and design for logistics. How many fit in the container? I had a lot of fun when that was new to me when I was doing those projects. It was like I thought it was going to be much more wild stuff, like Ludwig was coming up, like theoretical stuff. No, it's like how many things fit in a container? That's it. After that, boom, And then what's the cost of a 20-foot container? Should we just send part of it, etc.? Okay. Okay, Nick and Nick. Oh, Fiji's overrated. Okay, we have some life on the other end of the line here. All right. I shared that with the class, you guys. Very good. I'm going to take things down here a little bit slowly. If you guys have any, Nick, if you have any questions, let me know. You can just type them in there, or if you have a mic, you can let me know. I think I have my volume on. Okay, I'll turn my volume on now. Actually, I had the volume off because I had feedback before. All right? Did you get your money's worth tonight? Okay. I take that as a yes. I try to be very practical. I mean, I want to be able to have you walk in and use this information and see where you work, where it applies. Or if you can't use it, maybe you need another job. You know? Yes, and I'll issue some information about the report. I need you to get ahead of that. Like for next week, I'd like everybody to have a rough cut of everything, like a 50% point where you're confident you can do the rest of it, and I'll have you upload it. That's a good point. I hope Nick, I'll send that out as a note that to everybody in the class that get working on that, and I'll treat that as I have to give you rubrics if I'm going to grade it. All right, let me try to do it. I don't want to overburden you with this, but if you get more of your work done early, then you have less work to deliver in 2 weeks after next week, right? Because it's due 2 weeks after. I have to look to be sure myself on that, but it was Friday or Saturday or something like that. Yeah. Yep. And so this is what we're going to concentrate on because the homework's coming up. This is probably the more rigorous type of thing in the homeworks that we've had so far. So we'll go over this, and there'll be more examples, and like the quizzes will be covered over this and whatever. I have to get some points on the board for everybody. All right. Very good. Okay. Any questions? Email me. I generally get back. I know one of the Nicks asked me about a question, but I didn't get back to you. So, but usually I do. Yeah. All right. Okay. Drive safely. Bye-bye. Next week, I might even have wireless mics. They requested that. I want to be as ready as possible for our last week when I'm not going to be here and we're going to do it. So let's see. Got it. Okay. Kill the video. My God. Have a good night, and as I say, drive safely. Yep. Got that. Have a good one. Bye-bye.